Good morning and welcome back to the Pink. And we'll get stuck straight in because I know what you're all here for, and that is the fixtures for the Championship season, which have just been released a few minutes ago. To get started with the headlines, it is Oxford away at 12:30 on Sky Sports to kick off the campaign for Norwich. An interesting one there. Then Blackburn at home, then Sheffield United at home, and then trips away to Coventry and Swansea. Some of the other headlines, Millwall at home on Boxing Day. Cardiff at home is the final day, and what looks like it might be a bit of a tricky month is January, when Norwich play Luton and Sheffield United, obviously both relegated from the Premier League, as well as Leeds United, who lost in the playoff final. One thing you can guarantee is that Norwich will play everyone twice, once home, once away, and that's always obviously what you get from fixtures and when they're released. A lot of people very excited for it, and it does mark being a lot closer to the start of the season. It is an important day sort of in the pre-season, and to get fans hyped for it. But it doesn't really tell us loads without knowing much about how good the teams are going to be. Of course, the Championship is quite unpredictable at this stage of the season. None of us really knows what end of the table Norwich is going to be are going to be competing at. So it's quite difficult to predict, but there are some teams that look like they will be especially strong. You look at the squads that the likes of Leeds and Burnley coming down have, and it might be slightly difficult. I think it's a little bit different with maybe Luton and Sheffield United, who are coming down with squads who, yes, they were promoted from the Championship a couple of years ago, but haven't done great in the Premier League, haven't looked like the sorts that will come down and compete again for promotion. I'm sure that will be their aim. But Sheffield United are under a transfer, or not officially under a transfer embargo, but with new owners trying to take over the club, they're struggling in the transfer market. There are a few different clubs who maybe are hard to predict, even though on paper they look like they might be quite strong. But just to break down that start, it does feel like it might actually be a fairly decent one for Johannes Hoff Torp in English football. Going to Oxford away will bring its own pressure, because there will be a lot of attention on that game, not just the fact that it's an early kickoff and it's on TV, but obviously they are a newly promoted side who haven't been this high in the pyramid for a really long time, and everyone will be interested to see how that goes. So I think there's an element of pressure, but also an element of something to look forward to, because they have a squad that's just come out of League One through the playoffs. They've lost one of their key players in, obviously, ex-Norwich winger Josh Murphy, who's joined Portsmouth. I think late last night was when it was officially confirmed, and it feels like it should be a fairly winnable fixture for Norwich if they want to be competing at the top end of the Championship. Of course, in terms of the travel for the fans, it's not ideal, but I think for the players and how they'll be looking at it as an opportunity, it's something to look forward to, and something not to be intimidated by at all, really. Then you go to Blackburn, or back to Carrow Road to face Blackburn, and that feels like it should be a fairly winnable one as well. They're a team in flux, and they aren't going to have the budget to go and sign loads of players in this window. Greg Broughton, their sporting director, who also was previously at Norwich, has just left, and they do feel like a club that's in transition a little bit at the moment after a couple of good years. Then Sheffield United at home. I already spoke a little bit about the problems that they've got, and maybe the struggles that they might have this summer. Coventry away, I think, is the one that could prove pretty difficult. And although Norwich have got an excellent track record against Coventry in recent seasons, actually, they have consistently been a team that has wanted to compete at the top end of the table and has been able to recover from losing their best players and rebuild teams to do really well. And Mark Robins is a coach that I think everyone, especially in this part of the world, is aware of and knows how good a job he's doing. So that game, 4 games into the season, maybe would bring a halt to the momentum that Norwich could be able to build up in those first few games. Then going to Swansea away is never easy. Of course, a place where Norwich lost very disappointingly 2-1 last season. And the element of travel involved in that is one that always makes it feel a bit of a tough one for fans, for players. Obviously, that's a factor as well. And I think that double header of away games could be a little bit of a problem for Norwich. It is definitely an interesting way in terms of how they've scheduled the fixtures, and obviously there will be a reason for that. But the fact that they've got 2 home games in a row, and that provides them with an opportunity, and then Coventry and Swansea away, that might be a little bit of a difficult one. So it sort of will be about riding the wave of momentum and trying to keep their performances going, even if things do get tough. Skipping ahead to the end of the season, Cardiff at home. If Norwich have still got things to play for, and of course there is quite a realistic scenario where that isn't the case, because I think we're all expecting a fairly transitional season, even though Torop did speak in his official unveiling about the fact that he wanted to be competing for promotion, and this was too big a club at this level not to be competing for promotion. And if they are, Cardiff at home feels like the sort of fixture you go into feeling confident. I think any home game when there's something to be achieved is an advantage, rather than going to Birmingham, where I think a lot of people would have been expecting a decent result, but that's a bit of a tough one when they've got all of their support behind them. So I think being at home on the final day is a bit of an advantage, even if Norwich have lost the advantage maybe of being at home that they had last season, when they got off to a pretty good start against Hull, a decent team, and then went on that run of momentum after that. But I'll just dive into your comments and see what everyone is saying about these. Jeffman says, happy with that. Home games look very tough to start with, though. I suppose when you look at that Sheffield United one, especially in the first 5 games, that is true, but you'd rather have them at home than away, I suppose. And it also means you get them out of the way pretty early, and then Norwich can hopefully build some momentum at Carrow Road later on in the season, as they did last season to great success, and to qualify for the playoffs in the end. Just having a little look. Jason Butcher says next season will be tough, but we must stick with it. Fans wanting something different, and now patience will be required. I'm excited, no illusions of how tough a season this will be. I think this is where a lot of people are, and to be honest, this is where I'd probably encourage fans to be. I don't think if Norwich are in relegation trouble, then that should be where they are, and I think that's when fans should be worried about it. But I've seen a lot saying promotion is sort of essential, and that promotion should be targeted given the strength of the division this season, and it has undoubtedly gone down. But Norwich look like a team who might lose a couple of their key players this summer. They are in a bit of transition. They don't have much money to spend either, and they're under a coach who's trying to put some new tactical emphasis on the team, and that won't necessarily be easy all to do in one season. So I think patience will be key, even though Torop did speak ambitiously in his sort of unveiling, and I do agree with Jason in that sense. Jeffman says, let's hope we get some more Chris Wilder tears. That reunion will definitely be an interesting one. Norwich's record against Sheffield United has not been great. That's definitely a factor to consider going into it, but they do look very different teams to when they've sort of traditionally gone against each other, and when Norwich have struggled against them. I think a couple of seasons ago when Dean Smith was in charge, if I remember correctly, going to Bramall Lane, Norwich actually started really well, and then that atmosphere got on top of them. So I think the Bramall Lane factor is a big part of it. The fact that Norwich have got them Carrow Road early on, rather than having to go there, will be a real boost for them, rather than going into that bear pit a little bit and having to suffer with that. But I think you look at that team and somebody that's come down from the Premier League. Yes, there are reasons why they might struggle to push for promotion next season, but there are still players who have helped them get there. Gustavo Hamer, after all, he obviously wasn't in that team that got promoted, but he is clearly a very, very capable player. Did very well for Coventry before, and yeah, that Sheffield United one won't be easy, even if it does feel maybe slightly easier than Burnley, who I think you could earmark as probably the best of the teams to come down. Right then, I better crack on with some real work rather than just chatting to you this morning. But did enjoy that. Hopefully, you've gained a little bit, and you've got a bit of excitement going into the season and going into pre-season now. This does make it feel a little bit more real. Of course, it puts a date on the calendar in terms of Oxford United away. It allows fans and players and coaches and everyone involved to sort of map out how things are going to look across the season. But until we get going, it's hard to really say what the Championship will look like and what some of those teams will look like going into it. So I think after a couple of months, it might be easier to evaluate this fixture list. It does certainly on paper look like a weaker Championship than last year, and look like one that could be favourable for Norwich. But with the transition that they're in and some of the struggles that they might have going into their campaign, it will be tough, if not even tougher than last season. But as Jason said earlier, patience may be key. And I think the fans are willing to buy into that, given they've now got a coach who stands for the principles that have always succeeded at this football club, that the fans have always enjoyed at Carrow Road. And it should be a very exciting season. Of course, we'll have it covered across our channels throughout. Right now, you can go to our website where we've got all the fixtures listed in detail in case you want to look for some specific dates yourselves. And of course, we'll be breaking down that fixture list in more detail and some analysis. So go to pinkham.com/subscribe and you won't miss any of that. Thank you very much for joining me, and I'll see you very, very soon.